Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Thank you so much for coming. My name is Amy Draves, and it's a true pleasure to welcome Bob Mankoff to the Microsoft Research Visiting Speaker Series. Bob will discuss his book, How About Never? Is Never Good for You? He is visiting because he has been partnering with one of our researchers tackling the science of humor, and will tell you more about that. He is the cartoon editor at The New Yorker and founded the Cartoon Bank, which licenses cartoons for other purposes. He has partnered with universities to deliver classes on humor and has published more than 900 cartoons in The New Yorker, including one of the most popular cartoons of all time, which gave the title to this memoir. I also want to thank you guys for taking on the caption contest with true gusto. We had, in just 12 hours, we had over 200 entries. So please join me in giving him a very warm welcome.
Thank you. So we already have 200 losers. Hey, you're a good-looking audience. I mean, I've seen a little better, but I'm going to take a selfie. That's nice. Okay, that's nice. Hey, I am happy to be here. Received a really warm welcome. Everybody's here. And to you people online, up there who didn't have time to come down, I'm giving away special prizes here. So this is my book, How About Never Is Never Good for You. It's right there. You can buy it. If you do, then you get. Look, it's nice, right? Look, you're going to get a little drawing. Now, don't you think that was worth buying a GoPro for? Look, so, I'm going to do this little drawing for you guys. And I don't know, maybe you're not involved in art or what makes things more valuable or less valuable. But, it's a drawing. I'm a cartoon editor of The New Yorker. Me doing the drawing for you might make, this book over time more valuable. In which case, I would like it back. Okay, so the book actually is a book. It's a lot of writing. I talk about my mom, my dad, my growing up, my being Jewish. Here's my mom was a stereotypical Jewish mother, and she was, before a helicopter mother, there were drone mothers. And my mother was a drone mother, and she doted on me. I'm just going to read a little. Doting is probably too mild a word to describe my mother's obsessive attention to my existence, so long in doubt, and which she felt could be snatched away from her at any time. I'm told that when I was sleeping, she would put a mirror up to my mouth to see if it would fog over, showing that I was indeed breathing and alive. I still do that myself every once in a while, just to make sure. I think Molly's, my mother's name, administration's instilled in me a potential for hypochondria. A potential has been fully realized, so I do a lot of cartoons on that. Medicine. Well, Bob, it looks like a paper cut, but just to be sure, let's do lots of tests. Okay, so this is the cartoon, No Thursdays Out, How About Never Is Never Good for You. I've published about 950 cartoons. Like now, a cartoonist every week for The New Yorker does 10, 15, 20 ideas. You actually never know, you never really know which is going to hit with people. One of the differences between an amateur and a professional in some field like this is an amateur really likes what they do. A professional is always dissatisfied. So this cartoon, I think it was like the last one I threw off, and now it's been reprinted 1,000 times, put my daughter through college. So a little comedy theory and lesson, because we do little theory stuff here. Okay, so when you look at a joke like this, No Thursdays Out, How About Never Is Never Good for You? Well, it's funny, or why is it funny? Well, what you have actually is you have two different frames of reference that are clashing. You have the message is rude, right? It's rude. The syntax is polite. So those are the conflict. You're saying something very rude in a polite way. That's why you can't end, you could theoretically end the joke here. It would still be a joke, No Thursdays Out, How About Never? It would just be sharp and rude. But it wouldn't maintain the two different frames going together. That's the only secret I'm telling you today. Anyway, it's cool because it's in the Yale Book of Quotations, right there, next to that other famous humorist Mao Zedong. So, this tells you I'm old. And here's my 3 jokes about being 70. You'll see the structure of jokes. So I'm 70. The good news is it could be worse. The bad news is it will be. Okay, I'm 70. The good news is 70 is the new 50. The bad news is dead is not the new alive. Okay, when you're 70 and you're a guy and you wake up, you're stiff everywhere but where you want to be. Okay, so what happens when you publish a cartoon in the New Yorker, the cartoonist actually owns it. You have the copyright to the cartoon as it appears. Unfortunately, the actual phrase or whatever it is can be ripped off and is. So people rip it off. And now I've actually had to go through the copyright and trademark, so now I have that phrase, so you can't use it. But so it's on T-shirts, and you can also get it on this thong. If that appeals to you, you can get it on the thong. And the lawyers talked to the thong people, but they only offered free thongs. And, I don't know. So the book has a lot of content. I mean, it has a history of my life. One of the things in the book I talk about more than I'll talk about today is, so the first chapter is, I'm not arguing I'm Jewish. Because when I married my third, last, and best wife, Corey Scott Whittier, not Jewish, Corey Scott Whittier. And I thought I was having like a totally normal conversation with her. And she said, why are you arguing with me? I said, I'm not arguing, I'm Jewish. But I'm not this Jewish. But in the book, I do talk about, and in some of the lecture I did, is being Jewish is actually, if you're going to be in comedy, pretty important. In 1980, a survey was done, and 80% of people in professional comedy are Jewish. And I go back, and this whole story is about it coming from Eastern Europe and everything. So it's really interesting how the people of the book, and the book is not funny, the book, the Bible, is dreadful. Terrible. I mean, there are 29 instances of laughter, and if God laughs, you are toast. That is a really bad thing. So this is great. This is from Seinfeld, and I just like to show this thing where, okay.
I'll tell you what's up.
Uh-oh.
I'm a Jew.
No sound. Oh.
Excuse me?
I'm a Jew. I finished converting 2 days ago.
Oh, well. Welcome aboard. Hey, were you just at the health club?
Oh, yeah.
No, we must have just missed you.
Ah, well, I didn't do much. I just sat in the sauna. You know, it was more like a Jewish workout. That's it.
Elaine, the guy's Jewish 2 days. He's already making Jewish jokes.
That which reminds me, did you hear the one about the rabbi and the farmer's daughter? Huh?
So Jews became known for the jokes. I have a chapter that starts really in the 19th century. Freud wrote a book in 1905, Jokes and Their Relation to the Unconscious. And really, they're all Jewish jokes. I told one last night at dinner. I'll tell it again. It's great. And there's something unique about these jokes in that they depend very much on cognitive manipulation, rather than simply being transgressive or something like that. So in the 19th century in Eastern Europe, among Jews, there are a lot of these jokes about matchmakers. And the matchmaker is the one who brings the bride. Okay. And so the matchmaker brings the bride to the groom, and the groom brings him over and says, I don't understand. She's blind in one eye. She has a hunchback, and she limps. And the matchmaker says, you don't have to whisper, she's deaf too. A lot of the jokes, so in the Jewish tradition in Eastern Europe, there's the schnorrer. The schnorrer is not a beggar, exactly. The schnorrer is someone who, as a person, if you have means, you need to be charitable to in Jewish religion. It's your obligation. And the schnorrer takes advantage of this constantly in the jokes. So the rich man in Vienna, the schnorrer comes to him and says, I'm not feeling well. And he says, okay, I'll give you money for your health. He gives him money, and then he finds him at the fanciest spa in Vienna. And he says, what are you doing here? I gave you a little money. You're wasting at the fanciest spa. And the Schnorrer says, when it comes to my health, money is no object. Another one I really like because of the way it twists logic is this. The rich man gives the Schnorrer money to go eat. And then he eats whatever fancy dishes they have, some sort of salmon mayonnaise thing. And then the rich man sees him at the restaurant saying, eating the salmon. He says, what are you doing? I gave you money. You're eating the fanciest dish, the salmon. And the Schnorrer says, excuse me, if when I have no money, I can't eat salmon, and when I have money, I can't eat salmon, when can I eat salmon? So these types of cognitions and everything, it comes out when the immigrants go to vaudeville and in radio and then eventually television. But this way of thinking, which goes back to the Talmud, goes back to questioning God, because Judaism is a very skeptical religion. The Talmud is wrestling constantly with the problems. It's not just saying, oh, that's fine, I understand, you're God. I mean, I did a cartoon once in the New Yorker, which has a guy coming out of church, and he's saying to the priest, I know he works in mysterious ways, but if I work that mysteriously, I'd get fired. So this doubt. I grew up in Queens, and my parents would take me to these resorts in the Catskills where I was marinated in jokes. So these are all Jewish comedians from the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. I grew up in the 50s and 60s, I take them. So Rodney Dangerfield is an example, and I'm going to show it for another example.
I'll tell you, I'm all right now, but last week I was in rough shape, Well, last week I told my wife I need a home improvement loan. She gave me $1,000 to move out. I'll tell you, my wife, there's always something, Well, the other day I called her up. I said to her, honey, I've been thinking about the last time we had sex. I'm getting excited. She said, who is this? I tell you, my wife, she never went for me. Well, the first time I called her up, she told me, come on over, there's nobody home. I went over, there was nobody home.
Okay, so all of those, although the Dangerfield jokes are really coming right out of this tradition. So, I'm a cartoonist. Here are some of my cartoons. I'm sorry, dear, I wasn't listening. Could you repeat what you said since we've been married? On the one hand, eliminating the middleman would result in lower costs, increased sales, and greater consumer satisfaction. On the other hand, with the middleman, your coverage doesn't seem to include illness. As a matter of fact, you did catch us at a bad time. This is more philosophical. There is no justice in the world. There is some justice in the world. The world is just. Now that's product placement. It's called Hamlet's duplex. So part of this, I'm just showing you where I came from, and until I wrote the book and did the memoir and did the research, you don't feel everything has a cultural patrimony, where you're at. So I've done cartoons since 1977. The New Yorker has volumes of scrapbooks of every cartoon ever published, and for a long time, as well, it tagged and categorized every cartoon in these books. And when I die, they'll put this part in. Okay, what I'm going to show now, because this is part of the book, is some videos. And because the book is also about that. I became cartoon editor in 1997. There was a Nightline show on it. Okay, and then when I put this book out, there was a 60 Minutes. I'm going to show the two different videos because I want to show you how things have changed and really how they're the same, really, at the New Yorker. So first, this is the Nightline.
As cartoon editor, Mankoff now presides over the New Yorker's Tuesday morning ritual.
Can we make that louder?
Staff artists, like religious supplicants,
okay,
bring in a full week's work, hoping that just one cartoon will find favor.
Have we schmoozed enough?
Yeah.
All right, get out. One of the things about being a cartoonist, you have to put up with is the constant rejection. Because 95% of your work is being rejected. And I've got to say, it's easier rejecting than being rejected.
And to add to the cartoonist's agony, Mankoff usually scans their work with a stone face.
Kind of quiet in here.
Oh, it's quiet, but inside my mind is ricocheting with laughter. Okay, so that's 97. And this is later, as you can see, because I'm older. And sort of the same, but also different because the new generation of people are starting to do it. Hey, how are you? Paul, Robert. Well, I suppose you came in here to show me cartoons.
Every Wednesday, a nervous band of ink-stained wretches gathers at Bob Mankoff's office.
So let's see what you got here.
All right.
Hoping against hope to sell him a cartoon. As for what they're paid, no one's talking.
How many have been accepted, I really don't know.
There's the grizzled veteran Sam Gross, who figures he's submitted 30,000 cartoons, give or take. 30,000?
Yeah.
Many consider this his masterpiece. A dog at Heaven's Gate asking, "Is there any chance of getting my testicles back?"
I still have to push the envelope.
Sam has always pushed the envelope, things that you couldn't quite do. How you doing?
Very well.
There's always a little preliminary chit-chat.
How you been?
All right.
Farley.
Farley Katz specializes in the far out, in both cartoons and facial hair.
So what's going on with that mustache? Are you still entering the contest?
No, I retired from the circuit. This is all like a recreational mustache.
Okay.
And then Mankoff speed reads the rough sketches.
This is just too awkward a drawing.
Most get rejected. He's seen the idea in one form or another before.
You know, like, you know, whenever they open your bag at an airport?
Carolina Johnson has an airport security cartoon with the TSA guy saying, "You can pack this back up now."
Yeah.
Emily Flake has a joke featuring both King Kong and Godzilla.
The two heavy hitters in the monster world.
It's as simple as that.
Maybe it's just the day for facial hair, but Joe Data seems to be a contender with a Tarzan cartoon.
The apes are saying, "We found you and raised you as one of us. So we were just wondering, at what point did you learn to shave?"
Can I say, I have researched this. There is no iteration of Tarzan in literature, comic books, or movies in which he has facial hair. It makes no sense.
Right.
Here's some of the stuff around.
This is just stage one, thinning out the candidates to take to the magazine's editor.
This is a little bit too straightforward.
He's largely non-committal, pleasant but blunt.
It won't look right in our magazine.
When a drawing simply isn't good enough.
We're not that impressed. Okay, next. It doesn't have enough charm. So that's what happened. It sort of seems the same, but one of the things that's really different is humor itself changes over time, and the generations of people who do it must change. When I took over in 1997, the cartoonists were in their 40s and 50s and 60s, and it was a very well-oiled machine, but if a new generation didn't come in, there were going to be no New Yorker cartoonists. And when a new generation comes in, you have to accept more diversity. You have to accept also that jokes themselves change. So the jokes I told you, those Jewish jokes, they're great jokes, but they're not are today's jokes. There's much more absurdity in joking now than there would have been at another time. There's much more participation on the part of the viewer in having their imagination engaged. So that Tarzan joke would never occur in 1950. Or let's say it's a joke, I'll just tell you the title. Okay, so let's say it's called Paninis of the Old West. Now, there's something ludicrous about paninis of the Old West. Now already you're thinking, well, what could paninis of the Old West be? And then you see the villain is on the railroad tracks as the train is coming by. And the panini, anyway, that's what it is. But so that type of very loose, sort of crazy thinking is much more evident now as we're bombarded by many different sources, of stimuli and jokes, and then there's a whole field of meta humor. Like we have a caption contest, and there's an anti-caption contest, which the attempt is to give the absolute worst caption. There's a caption contest which is called themonkeysyouordered.com, which simply describes the caption. So the caption to the one that you had would be, there's a man in a suit rowing next to me. Which won't be funny to you, but will be funny to you as you see all of them. There's a caption in which the same caption is put on every single contest. And that caption for every single contest is, "What a misunderstanding," which somehow works. Okay, how did I get to be the cartoon editor and the cartoonist? Okay, so I went to the High School of Music and Art with art. Oops, sorry. No, we're not doing this. Forget it. Yeah, I didn't panic. I mean, last time that happened, I ripped the screen, and that was wrong. So I went to Music and Art. Music and Art was a school in New York City, which is on 135th Street in Spanish Harlem. Now it's somewhere else. They changed the name, 60s and 70s to LaGuardia High School because they thought LaGuardia High School is a lot more catchy name than Music and Art. So I went to Music and Art on art because I could draw a little bit. This is me in 1962, but look at this dude. Look at Edward Barak. Edward Barak, this is 1962. He's got a pipe, right? They're wild. So I was writing the memoir. I said, of course, it's the internet. You can find out anything. What happened to Edward Barak? He became the Dean of American Pipe Design. That shows you what focus will do. I mean, that's astounding. I mean, just think how much I could have accomplished. And I only smoked a pipe, but I didn't. Okay, 62, I went to Syracuse University where I majored in hair, which I still have. Now, Syracuse, I didn't go to any classes at all, because it was the 60s or whatever. And when people say, "Did you do any drugs?" And I said, "Not enough." That's the one regret I have. If I would go back, I would do more drugs. But the transformative moment at Syracuse was a moment really that changed my life, because I didn't go to class because there's these large seminar classes. You could go to the first class and you could get the textbook. You could wait till the last class, take amphetamines, read the whole book, and do the thing. So that's what I did for the sociology class. So I'd been to the first class, to find out when the test was, and then I got the book, the pills, and I went to the class. And so it's really crowded. It's like one of those big rooms, and I'm late. I mean, I should have been early with the amphetamines, but I was late. And it's all crowded, and I have to come in. And my hair is much, much longer. And totally more hippified. So I'm standing out. I go and I rush to the seat. I pick up the the blue book. I don't know if they still have blue books. And I sit down and start scribbling. And so the teacher comes up to me and looms over me, looks down at me and says, "Who the hell are you?" And so I looked up at him and said, "I could very well ask you the same question." And I think that was the point my life changed, because it's sort of the power of humor to change situation, the courage of it in the face of what seems like odds, and everybody has all the cards, and you fucked up and everything, but you still stand up. You're still a person. You can change things around. And of course, the class laughs, and that is so great. So what if I flunked? Didn't matter. Actually, I didn't flunk. He passed me. Okay, then I went to graduate school in experimental psychology, and I got all my credits for a PhD, and I was on the cusp of my PhD. I remain on the cusp all these years later. I mean, it was the world's largest cusp. Just extended forever. And what it did was it was behaviorism in the 70s. So you put these defenseless animals in these cages, and you did things to them that are now outlawed by the Geneva Convention. what you did primarily was with schedules of reinforcement. So reinforcement is a reward for the animal, and it's negative reinforcement too, which is not punishment, but something else. But so if you every time the animal presses the bar, you give them food. Naturally, they press the bar. And if you stop, they stop. Well, not a big deal about that. So part of it was, well, what types of schedules of reinforcement encourage persistence? And it turns out if you start the animal off, feed him all the time with pressing the bar, and then you start to vary it in a very variable manner, and it can either be by time or responses, you lose great persistence. And those intermittent schedules of reinforcement. So that's sort of what I did. I quit because of the cusp. We've mentioned that. And I told my parents I wasn't going to be a psychologist, my Jewish parents. I was going to be a cartoonist. My father, who worked during the Depression, was born in 1908, turned to me very sternly and said, "You know, they already have people who do that." I said, "Yeah, but one of them might die. So all I got to do is be alert, read the papers, and I'm first in line." So I started doing cartoons, lots of cartoons. I kept getting rejected by the New Yorker, at least 1,000 times at the New Yorker. Rejection, rejection, rejection. Now, that's interesting because I was selling cartoons to other magazines every once in a while. That was my intermittent schedule of reinforcement that kept. If I hadn't sold anything, I wouldn't have kept going. But just getting published was this huge reinforcement. And then, just because of the way that they weren't putting me intentionally on an intermittent schedule of reinforcement, but that's the nature of this type of work. So I did sell cartoons. This is 1974. This is the first cartoon I ever sold. Okay. Faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, no shorthand. That shows you how long ago that was. Then this is, "Please tell the king I remembered the punchline." And I work in a stipple technique with a technical pen. I still do that. So these were labor intensive. These are all done with these tiny little dots. But finally, in 1977, after all those submissions, this changed to this. Which it didn't, because the New Yorker that is not New Yorker humor. But in each one of these things, maybe eventually we'll talk in the Q&A, well, what makes things funny? Why is that funny versus something else? What is the clash involved here? But partly it's an emotional truth. This is actually how you felt, what you screamed, and everything. Besides the fact that I felt, I proved my parents wrong. So now I'm cartoon editor all these years later, and that's a whole other story that's in the book. And sort of this is what I do. You saw me meet with people. I meet on Tuesdays. It's called Open Call Tuesday, so anybody can come and see me. But most of the cartoons really come in because not everybody's in New York. There are people in England and Taipei and France and everything. So it comes in electronically, but you print it out because it's still pretty much the best way to look at these things, maybe even the way you want to look at them. Most of them come in as PDFs. So I'll look at 1,000 cartoons. There's no laugh meter there. And in fact, I don't laugh at all. And that's something interesting psychological. What do you mean you don't laugh? How can you possibly be judging these cartoons? Well, evaluation is very different than experiencing something. Anything that you evaluate in this way becomes mediated and will automatically suppress what actual response you have. If you're so you don't enjoy it in that same way. I mean, you do it, you appreciate it, you understand. It's basically it's a craft. Is this joke working? How will it be changed? Because here, when you looked at each of those jokes, well, you responded to them as jokes and everything. You didn't think, oh, should that be edited? Should it be briefer? Should it be this? Should it be that? But that's naturally my concern. So everything I'm looking at. Then there are all other factors that have to be factored in, which is that you actually can't look sequentially at a number of jokes and judge them without knowing that these are serialization and satiation effects. If you just simply think, because you'll say, it'd be like you're a bonbon taster, and you're hungry, and the first one you taste, man, these bonbons are great. And then, after your 1,000th bonbon, you throw up and you say, these bonbons are terrible. You're not bringing in the factors. So I'm thinking of all this, and I have a philosophy of what I want. Okay, so this is interesting. This is William Hogarth, The Laughing Audience, and everybody's laughing except this guy. This guy is the critic. This is the evaluator. So I have to watch out that I don't become that guy. And that actually is a fairly easy thing to happen, where you forget what the purpose is of what you're doing, which is primarily to provide the cartoons for the audience. Primarily for the audience, not solely, because it's the New Yorker. So we're pushing the envelope, and and there are things that I want to push, because most people, if you say, oh, what makes jokes good? Novelty. Not really. Not for most people. Most people don't like very much novelty. They like novelty within a cocoon of familiarity. So if you do an experiment where you have a stand-up routine and you stop the joke before the punchline, and you have those people predict the joke, then you have other people evaluate it. Most people like the most predictable jokes, the things they almost could think of. So I want to avoid that also, but I don't want to be a fussy connoisseur, because that's what your natural tendency will be if you look at much material that nothing is good. Barry Schwartz wrote a book, The Paradox of Choice. You'll very easily, because, okay, 1,000 cartoons are going to come in. You're going to pick 17. How are you going to pick the 17? You must pick the 17 in some way by thinking this is no good in some way, this is no good, this isn't good. So part of it is a negative mindset is starting to evolve rather than experiential mindset. Also, in the picking, let's say you say, I don't like this one and I like this one, but I do like this little thing about this one that I rejected. I like this one better overall, but now the thing that you liked in the other one that you have to reject is now detracting from the thing that you like more. So your own experience for it devalues it. So my background in psychology, I think, helps me, and this is actually when I'm with David Remnick or other people who are brilliant, but I think in this way naive a little bit, saying, okay, you are seeing some satiation or serialization effects by doing this. Okay, so what are we looking for? Well, I've told you a little bit, but here's the contract I got from the New Yorker in 1980. And it's interesting, nowhere in the contract does it mention the word cartoons. All ideas. And so primarily the New Yorker's cartoons are about ideas. They're not simply about violating expectations or transgression. Or the things that make people laugh the loudest are actually fairly simple. The people falling down and getting hurt, but not really getting hurt to music. That's what America's Funniest Home Videos is. That if you actually watch, or if you go up on the internet and you look at prank humor and stuff, and you see what people laugh at really heartily, is this, and it's in this very, very primal experience that when we, I mean, part of the way to look at humor is a little bit as, I've talked about this last night, as it's surprise. And for an organism, it's always bad to be surprised, because surprise is a negative, you should always bet on it being something bad. So originally, when you're surprised, you bet negative because that's more protective. When the fat man falls on the banana peel, your mirror neurons or whatever are actually reacting to it a little bit like you fell, a little bit, and at that moment you are betting negative that something bad has happened. Immediately after that, something not bad happens, and if he got hurt, that would be one thing, and that's this relief laughter. So that's, in a way, that's the most primitive type. We're not dealing with that here, so the mechanisms we use have to be, more cognitive ideas. People say, how do I get ideas? I think of them. Okay, so I want to make some of the thinking as simple as possible, not because these are great jokes, but just to show how simple it is. Okay, that's right, in that a person in a chair sort of stands up like that. So right is never funny. It's got to be wrong in some way. Okay, that's wrong. And it's not very funny, but it's marginally more funny. It's marginally more funny to see the wrong like that, right? And then I can complete it by making a joke, budget recliner. Okay, so watch the thing. Right, wrong, funny. Okay, that's right. She's got 2 buckets. That's wrong. So the field is disturbed now. You feel like, hey, you got to make sense of this. And then that's funny. Okay, so that's right. Bad for the lemmings, but okay, but that's what they do. They go off the cliff, right? And that's wrong. They don't go up. And that's funny. So I'm just sort of showing you just the way, in a simple way, the way it works. Usually, humor is going to be, first of all, it can't praise, it can't elevate, it must always, not must always, because, that makes it so broad. You find like one counter example, there's whimsy and things, but overall, it diminishes in some way. It diminishes what is happening. Okay, how to win the New Yorker Caption Contest. We'll get to your... So, the New Yorker Caption Contest, what is it? On the back page every week we have a contest you can enter. We have a contest in which there are finalists, and we have a winner. Overall, so this one over here, if you can't see it quite, shows zombies are attacking these people. This guy has cookies, and this woman has a gun. Okay, so that's the one you had to solve. Overall, it's a 5-week process, so it's a little weird because we can't possibly have a caption contest on the back page and then which runs all the way through the week, and then on Monday have it because 5,000 come in. So overall, it's a 5-week process before it finally gets done. So in this instance, that was, let's hope for some nut allergies. Now on that, we got letters from people who have nut allergies and that. And the New Yorker is a complicated frame for which to do cartoons, because humor, as I said, diminishes, has an aggressive element often, and is really, for the most part, the opposite of empathetic feelings, of real empathy. They're really at odds somewhat. And the New Yorker, because it's a very liberal magazine and so many of the articles make us feel empathetically, make us care about the world, that we're heightened when anything like happens. So, for example, we ran a cartoon in which one woman is saying to the other, I've only been gluten-free for a week, but I'm already annoying. And we got lots of letters. We got a letter from a woman from lots of people who really misread it because, he said, being gluten-free is not a fad for me. I have celiac disease. Try, walking a mile in my shoes, which, for that woman is a good idea because you walk a mile in their shoes, you'll be a mile away from them, and you'll have their shoes. But so it's a very sensitive environment. So we got protests there. Okay, this is a little bit out of date. Now we're up to like 475. There's about, and we're doing some experiments here with all this data. So we get about 5,000 a week. There's been about 2.5 million entries now. Your chance of winning maybe is that. I don't know. I had someone do this formula, which I think works out, which is that if you just entered week after week by chance, what would be your chance of winning? And it turns out that, just by chance, by 2026, you would have a 20% chance of winning. And I think actually that would mean that you had put in the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours, which means that you seriously need to reorder your priorities. If you put in 10,000 hours on this. Okay. Many more men enter than women, about 84%. More women actually end up winning in percentage, which is interesting. And I think it's one of these things when you remove a lot of external variables from what make people laugh, where the only thing you actually have is your words and it's anonymous, women do quite well. 10 top states, where you can see New York and California. But if you normalize for population, you get a little bit different look. You know what I mean? And generally what you're going to see is that liberal states, probably because they more subscribers to the New Yorker. Okay, so this is the actual process that goes on now. That's my cartoon assistant, Marc-Philippe Eskenazi, who we call Marc-Philippe Eskenaz for short. And here's a little video of him looking at the contest.
Cruising for captions here.
Shortly before I started, it was when they started the caption contests. The assistant needed to be someone who could judge all those captions.
People go onto the internet and enter their idea for the best gag line for that cartoon, and then some poor soul sorts through all of those at the end of the week.
I mean, mainly my job was to just read 8,000 captions a week. That was fun, but it was also soul-crushing.
My eyes, which had leveled off at sort of like a certain blurriness, increased several, whatever they are, like blindness points after staring at those captions for so long.
So one of the, I'm out here collaborating with some people at Microsoft. There have been a number of research into this, and truly at 5 or even 10,000, it's a manageable task to do. At 100,000 or a million, it wouldn't be manageable. It's actually fairly restricted. It's subscribers to the New Yorker. So all of a sudden, if we had mobile apps and everyone could enter and you were going to win a lot of money, you could do it, I think, through crowdsourcing a lot of people. But we're looking to see how computers can help. So my new course is Colin Stokes, and so he does this thing. This would be for that caption contest, and it always, here's the thing: there are 5,000 different captions or 10,000 different captions, but not 10,000 different captions. They come in clusters, and this is called collective discourse. And you can have very big clusters. You can have clusters of 1,000, like for the contest, which we'll get to, that you did, and we'll talk about that. There's one big cluster. So this is wordplay, dietary restriction, cooking. This is all zombie stuff. Hosting dinner parties, killing, violence, relationship, cultural references. Then what I do is I pick at that point, after I get these categories 8, I put them on SurveyMonkey. SurveyMonkey gives it to the editors of the New Yorker in randomized fashion. They judge then, and their judgment is usually they don't judge them very highly because, once again, they're having this problem of evaluation. All of a sudden, they're having this crazy task of saying this is funnier than this is funnier than this. You do get a consensus, but here's what's interesting. Okay, so here's this person for that particular contest. They thought pretty much everything was funny. Here's this other person who thought pretty much everything was unfunny. That person. So when you get to the granular level, you see the true subjectivity of humor. Of course, the larger the number you make, you'll think it's a consensus. It's sort of a little bit like it is here. First of all, laughter is contagious. So the general feeling in this room is, I'm funny. Particular individuals, and I know who you are, have a different opinion. But that's just the nature. It's just so subjective. Okay, here's an interesting Ted Danson and Bored to Death. So he's this.
What would a police duck say to a suicidal bear? You can bear it? Oh, God, that's terrible. I'm never going to win this thing.
What are you doing?
So he's not going to win it. Now, Roger Ebert, the late Roger Ebert, entered 107 times, finally won with, I'm not going to say the word I'm thinking of. One of the first studies done to look at it was by Peter McGraw and Phil Fernbach, and they looked at all from the Ebert thing, and they came up with these are the rules to win. Novelty, captions that use words that are uncommon and other captions are more likely to make the short list. Punctuation, captions that avoid exclamation points. Length, captions that use fewer words. And abstractness and imaginability, captions that are hard to visualize. And that would be true of Ebert's caption, because from, I'm not going to say the word I'm thinking of, you wouldn't know. The problem with any theory of humor is if you actually have to look at all the different things, to see is it true in these instances. And so you take a contest like this, objection, Your Honor, alleged killer whale. This was the winning one, and there were many, many like that, a huge cluster. And when you look at it, certainly not true of novelty. Punctuation, it's got to be punctuated with an exclamation point. Length, that's true. Abstraction, imaginability, not true for this. And, be funny. Yeah, you got to be funny. Interestingly, this is a terrible caption contest. And why is it a terrible caption contest? Well, it's not a real caption contest at all. It's a terrible caption contest. Ebert never would have figured it out. It's very difficult because there are too many frames of reference in the image. It's not just that there's a bear who's suicidal here. There's a duck, and he's not simply a duck, he's a police duck. Now you have to try, in other words, it's a funny picture, but how are you going to put it all together? That would have been a simpler picture, still incongruous, right? And you could have solved it with, go home and get some sleep, you'll feel better in May. Why did you ever take a job on Wall Street? Okay, now I've added, look at it's a bull and a bear, and you can make sense out of it now, right? Because you can say, it's just an expression, no one blames you for the market. We all have bad days. How do you think when I feel the market doesn't set a record high? Okay, and try not to land on my sculpture. Okay, and I'm doing experiments, and now I've increased the incongruity. I've made the picture weirder in front of you, but much harder. Still possible to solve. Oh yeah, try getting called pig all day. Really, I've got a brother who works with stocks and just loves it. So this was your caption contest, right? This is the one you entered. I didn't have time to look at all the entries because they came in at the end. This is a contest we actually ran, and this is what happens. These are the types of clusters that come in. Airplanes, first time in coach, finance offices, your last job sounds terrible, clothes dressing. Okay, now the big cluster that came in from you guys was casual Fridays. And in this contest itself, out of 5,990 entries were casual Fridays. 990. If you look at how they come in time-wise, those come in first. Those come in first. So naturally, when I'm saying that, it may actually be that is the funniest caption in some way, but in terms of the criteria I'm using, it's not going to be. So the one that we actually wanted was your last job sounds terrible. This is what came in on your stuff. And so there was our dress code, stuff like that. I just didn't have a chance to look at it. I am going to award the winner. You'll get a free book and a trip to Miami. No, just the book. One thing to remember is that sometimes the very best caption is the simplest. Sort of makes you stop and think, doesn't it? I hope I have. Thanks very much. I'll be happy to answer some questions. And you can buy the book. Questions? Anybody have questions? Oh, come on. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you tell us about your drawing style? How did you go from people using lines and half tones to dots?
I drew that way in the High School of Music and Art. It was this idiosyncratic style. It was based somewhat on photographs. I loved the way photographs looked, and they were all formed from actually little dots. And I actually just started copying photographs, dots for dots. And then I did it, and then it became a very distinctive style that magazines noticed, and I kept up with it. And now I have all these repetitive use injuries. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you ever ask cartoonists to revise a cartoon?
All the time. I mean, all the time. I'm a cartoon editor, so I have a whole thing. You know, I edit it also, always looking. They're knocking off a lot of cartoons at once. Their point of submitting those cartoons is to generate lots of stuff, not to worry every single comment and everything. And so that's what I do, usually for compression, especially for younger cartoonists that I'm mentoring. I mean, a lot of, like, if you looked at a lot, I didn't get a chance to look at your stuff, but a lot of you put the punchline first, or then you just put some other line after the punchline, and, you know, it doesn't work. Yeah, go ahead.
So how do you still contribute cartoons? How do you deal with them in your process?
Well, you know, people say there's a conflict of interest, because not only did I start the cartoon bank, not only do I select the cartoons and publish my own cartoons, right, it's all those things. So people have said, is there a conflict of interest? And I think I established a blue ribbon committee, which I'm heading. I don't submit that much anymore. I'm just not that interested. I'm interested in mentoring a whole new generation. I feel that your life course is to do different things. When I'm really interested in the academic part, new generation of cartoonists, research and humor, and bringing that in. So I started off as a player, then a player coach, and now it's more a coach, and being almost out here as a symbol of the New Yorker, what we do, and inspiring people, and that's the best thing I can do. Any more questions? All right, back there.
What do you think of webcomics like XKCD?
I think there's an amazing amount of creativity out in webcomics and everywhere else. The problem with so much of it is it going to be a hobby or is it going to be a profession? With so much, it's not that the internet, that cartoons are going to go away or anything, and that's going to be the problem not just for cartoons, but for so many creative things that we used to do and get paid for, is it may in the end actually be better. You know, we've gone to a model where the only people who do things are the professionals. The only people who sing are at one point. The only people who draw. And then once it turns out that you're not the very best anymore and you can't get into these slots, you stop. So that may be. I think humor will keep changing. And truthfully, the thing I guess I worry about is I do think look, you can do everything with crowdsourcing. You can do everything with how many people like this, and then the people like this got better, and most people like this, okay? And then you do get a sort of general consensus, but I don't think you then, you know, get those things that you didn't know you like, or that's what I try to do. I try to push people to things they might not otherwise like. All right, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, did the tragedy in France with Charlie Hebdo, did that affect any of your editorial guidelines, or?
Well, Charlie Hebdo was completely smeared. They were not racist. You had to read the cartoons. I know the people there. You know, I gave a talk at Penn. I think that free speech is obviously very important. Humor is often the marginalized second citizen of free speech. It's the tip of the spear in the back of the bus when it comes to defending it, because we feel we can sacrifice humor. It's not that important, the points it makes. We understand that ridicule and contempt, I mean, absolutely, a lot of those cartoons, I mean, when you looked at it, of course, they ridiculed, they ridiculed people who wanted to kill them for drawing a picture. You can't remove the contempt and the ridicule from the message without having what the message actually is. The message partly is there are some beliefs that don't deserve reasoned counter-argument. I mean, that's when we're making fun of religion. When I'm saying, when I hear things, he works in mysterious ways, I'm making the joke, if I work that mysterious, I'll get fired. The joke I made at Penn was, I gave a little speech because they were there in support of them as cartoon editor of the New Yorker. And I said, because, you know, a lot of writers backed out. And it was a black tie dinner. And some writers had backed out. Some have changed their mind. And I said, well, there was no way I was going to back out because I'd already rented this tux. And it was very expensive because it's bulletproof. And then I said, my thing was, well, is that joke too far? Does it go over the line? And also this whole thing about being offended by jokes. I mean, I understand whether it's Microsoft or the New Yorker, we're commercial enterprises. So really, the thing that really limits free speech mostly is commercialism. We have audiences and we want people to buy things. We don't want them to be offended or too much of them to be offended because they'll buy things. But when you do what you say, what the harm offense does, the actual harm, let's say the woman, the gluten-free woman, then what, if someone says to me they were offended by a cartoon, I mean a reasonable person, I ask, well, then what happened? Were you able to have lunch? Could you not sleep? Did you have post-traumatic stress syndrome? I mean, as I was talking to people yesterday, I said, I think what we really need is not so much as sensitivity training as insensitivity training, just to be a little tough. Anyway, I got to sign the book. Oh, one more, go ahead.
So I went to a stand-up comedian recently, and I really enjoyed it. He's good, and had the whole place rolling, just laughing.
Who was it again?
I forget his name, actually.
See, that's what's so great about humor. A comedian?
My question was to you, I noticed that the comedian, he had the whole place laughing, just the whole place rolling, which is fun. I imagine that's which is the comedian's, obviously their intent, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I imagine cartooning is probably the same way, where you're able to have that effect on people. You know, the laugh, hitting that funny bone where it's just like...
Well, it's somewhat different because it's mediated. There's a whole buffer of being published and everything, so you get nice letters. But this is fun. This is fun to have people... enjoy that. And for a lot of comedians and people, one of the problems of the fun that it is it's an addictive fun. And it's not easy. And not everybody always laughs. Not everybody's always rolling. And when you're in a group like this is a very primal group in a way. In some ways, it's very easy to get laughs because there's a lot of tension. First of all, you really can't say anything while I'm talking. You're not supposed to. You only have one response. I mean, you might frown or you can laugh. And then I'm one person up in front of all you guys. That can't be good from an evolutionary standpoint. Bad things could happen to me if you don't like me. I mean, you could run up and kill me. You could, you know what I mean? And all I have, and every time I tell a joke that falls flat, or you start to look like that, there's something very deep that says, not only are you failing, but you feel worse than that. There's a whole group of people that don't like you. You've promised them something that you're going to make them laugh, and you haven't. And on that somber note, let me go sign the books. Thank you.